Bob, I'm glad you survived your little frolic in Vegas. You earned it. The team earned it. That was quite a show last night.
Well, you had two very different shows last night, didn't you?
Oh, my God. I just said to Derek, I said, he said the town comes alive, Edmonton, and you know what it's like in the Ice District and all around the core of Edmonton during these runs, whereas we're on life support in the city of Toronto, and I feel that's the hard part. I know the fans, some of them throw sweaters, which is awful. It's kind of just sacrilege in our love affair with the game, but you can understand the angst down here, and it's just like the Moss Pit, they gather at Maple Leaf Square here, and everywhere I've gone for the last week too, it's everybody probing about the series and hoping against all hope. And look, it's not over. And you know of all things, the Oilers were dead after 2 games against LA.
Yep.
And they were in a lot of trouble after 2 periods of Game 4 against LA. And then there's the, buzzer beater. So they've had a few moments where you think, but nothing like what we saw with Toronto last night.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ron. So I'm in year 17 doing the Oilers. And from 2000, and we've been doing this show in one form or another for 16 of those 17 years. And when things were specifically bad, which were the 13th and 14th season, 14-15, I think those were the worst 2 years, okay? 17-18 wasn't great either, but 13-14, 14-15 were bad. At that time, Oilers Now was noon to 2, and we would come back, and the difference is people, and they're smart enough to get this, in the playoffs, because of the potential of overtime, we can't fly after games all the time because we don't know when the game's going to end. We've got to have security and all those other things in place. But in the regular season, you can. And so there'd be times that we'd be flying back from Dallas and getting in at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have one of the other media guys going, "You're not doing your show today. Are you at noon?" And I'm like, we just went on a road trip and lost all 4 games, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing it. That's what I'm paid for. I'm paid for days like that." Like it's, you got to stick, and that comes with the territory. And so I feel some empathy for what's going on in Toronto. I got to tell you, Ron, I'm surprised. Like they're up 2-0. They're up 3-1 in Game 3. I thought the Leafs were going to win in 5 over Florida. Shame on me. And I got all the respect in the world for Florida. They beat the Oilers in the final last year. But 3 years in a row for Florida to be this extended, I thought might be a bit much. What's happened from your perspective? You're there all the time in TO. What's going on there?
Well, one of the observations that's been made is Marner doesn't shoot the puck, and it doesn't seem like Austin can. He's been wide. Going into last night's game, he'd missed the net 23 times, wide 15, and they just don't seem to have the zip. Elliott showed a graphic of how the miles per hour, the velocity in his shots is down noticeably. So you got a guy who can't shoot with a guy who won't shoot. Why have them together? That's one of the problems. And then, Nylander has been very effective. He's probably been the best of the core for Toronto. Matthew Knies is on a different, he's become their best player. And Lawton was good last night, but you could point to goaltending. You certainly, again, Edmonton had that come at them, and Pickard saved the day for a while, and then Stuart Skinner pitches back-to-back shutouts, whereas Wohl, he had the one good game 2 games ago, but he wasn't. Stolar seemed to be the guy, although I'll be honest, against Ottawa, I felt like he was starting to run the gamut. Yes, yeah. He hadn't played in his career that many in succession. And I thought he looked a little shaky for sure in the last 3 games of the Ottawa series. So you could point a little bit to that, but their defense, like Edmonton's, I remember when the Oilers won in 1990, there wasn't Coffey. There wasn't really that marquee star, but there was 6, any of whom you could throw over the boards. And they're kind of right back in that. Like on that, so many things happened last night, but on the winning goal by Kapanen, first of all, Chris Knobloch and the staff, for Draisaitl, just his own sheer brilliance. He almost jumped into the play before. He just stays at the bench on the boards and waits his turn. And I'm a little confused because the game summary has Klingberg on the ice as part of the winning goal. But I think it was Wallman who threw it up because
Wallman. I walked back to the hotel with Wallman last night. He changed. He was not on the ice for the goal.
Well, he was not. So it is Klingberg throws it up to Podkolzin. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Because on the shift chart it shows Wallman being on the ice. Anyway, that was a great play. And the first time Klingberg threw it up the left wing wall, it went to Connor Brown. He ultimately changes, and that's the Henrique line. But for whatever reason, Henrique doesn't go then, I don't think. Somebody doesn't go, and Draisaitl has the wherewithal to stay on the boards. You'll see it if you watch it, and see him jump back up on the boards and wait his turn, and then, of course, he makes the key play on the winning goal. The other funny thing that I was struck by, these are just the rules of what happens in Vegas, but when Hyman and McDavid go in with a 106 to play on a 2-on-1,
yeah.
And McDavid, he shot, which I was glad to see because there was a little bit of overpassing in the third, but he took the shot. Now the play ends up behind the net, and it's Pietrangelo and Hyman in a bit of a skirmish. Hyman gives him a little love tap, and then I don't know if gloves are dropped, but somehow Hyman's stick ends up on the ice, and guess who steals it? Pietrangelo. So if you watch the TV, he's going off the ice with his stick and Zach Hyman's, and Hyman's just got that bemused smile. Anyway, it's theft. It's a crime. It's Sin City. You shouldn't have done it, Pietrangelo, and that's karma for you.
Okay, well, you went a long way on that one. I mean, so I'm gonna throw a couple. Okay, first of all, Hyman, the Oilers signed him 7-year deal, $5.5 million, 27, 36, 54 goals, injury riddled this year. In the mid-20s. He leads the NHL in playoff hits. He's got 78 hits in 11 games. Like he's got 7 hits a game. And in the playoffs, everybody's got a hit and everybody's got a front and block shots, right? Yeah. That just comes with the territory. So there's a guy that's, the Oilers have McDavid and Draisaitl. And then they had sort of Nurse and Nugent-Hopkins. And then they added Hyman and Ekholm, which even makes it more impressive that they didn't even have Ekholm for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs and they did this. But if you look at the productivity of Edmonton's top players, Connor and Leon, it's off the charts. And, I'm circling back to Marner here. He's less than a point per game. They've played some tough teams, Toronto in the playoffs, but he's got 62 points in 68 games all time. I mean, Connor and Leon are second and fourth all time, Ron, in points per game in the playoffs. The Oilers guys, they've delivered, and I think that's therein lies.
Sure.
And you look at Matthews; he's at 58 points in 66 games. I respect how good those players are. And I'll even grant you they probably played some tougher opponents, but you got to push through and find a way. That said, it is a best of 7, not a best of 5. Florida has not won the series yet.
I said that on Hockey Night. I said I mentioned to Bob after the game 1 win. I said, "Congrats to your Oilers on the win." And Bob said to me, and I told Elliot because he'd get a kick out of it. And Bob said to me, "Ron, it isn't a best of 1; it's a best of 7." Yes. I said, "Imagine Bob lecturing me on loving the Oilers." Anyway, you're right. And listen, the goals have been clutch, even although the depth of the Oilers.
Yeah.
And I go right back to after Game 2 of the final last year in the Prime Video with Connor in the room. Hey, everybody. This isn't good enough. We need everybody. Whatever you have to bring it now. And now they're bringing it. That's the lesson they learned, is that they have to win without 97 and 29 on the ice. But the big goals, 2 of them overtime for Draisaitl. Connor tied the game late, and that was, again, a good coaching shuffle. They took Perry off, put Hyman on the line, and Connor got it off McNabb to tie the game. Unfortunately, Riley Smith beat the clock.
Yeah.
But they have delivered, which is what the core, especially Marner and Matthews, have been unable to do for whatever reason. They can't seem to score the big goals at all. They're not involved games 5 through 7. And that is a really disturbing trend. Now, when Yzerman was sort of had everybody pointing at him as the guy that can't win and can't lead, these were monumental screw-ups. In 93, they lost to the Leafs in the first round. In 94, they lost to San Jose in 7 in the first round. Then in 95, they finally make the final. They get blown out in 4 straight by the Devils. And it was time to trade Yzerman. Scotty, the whispers were the kid's going to Ottawa, his hometown. But they stuck with him. They converted him from a 65-goal guy to a two-way player. And that's what Matthews is trying to explain that he's doing. But it just feels like, okay, we sure could use a goal.
Well, and, I think Trey Living's built a better supporting cast around those guys as well.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say about the Detroit narrative that's out there is they did have the Russian 5, right? Like they added some pretty good players. The old Bear Bryant line, Ron. The coach that's the best coach is the coach that's got the walks off the bus with the best players, right? Like if you got and I think Edmonton has greater depth than people realized. They've
Well,
got
you look at these
yeah,
playoffs, Bob, and Stan Bowman has done an incredible job. Kapanen, who saw that coming in November? Obviously, Klingberg has offset the loss of home, and then you bring in Wallman, who's a great puck
yeah.
moving. So you can look at just a few days in March 7th or right around there. Edmonton brings in Wallman at the deadline. He's been huge. Carolina is involved in the Rantanen, but Logan Stankoven scored a huge goal in Game 6 of the first round May 6th against Washington. Riley Smith, obviously, you see how good he was for Vegas.
Yeah.
Dallas gets Granlund and Rantanen. Brad Marchand to Boston. They bring in this guy. They've already won a cup, but they aren't satisfied. And that was Glenn Sather's MO. He would always bring in fresh blood, get someone hungry in there just to keep everybody on their toes.
So the Oilers, and we got to wait for Dallas and Winnipeg, and it's going to be a heck of a team. Edmonton plays next. It's interesting that a couple, and I mentioned this in the previous half hour, Brian Lawton and Bruce Kurlock, who does some work at Oilers Nation, both thought that this would be an easier series than the LA was the more dangerous team. And I just looked at the pedigree of Vegas and the respect I have for Kelly McCrimmon. Cassidy's won a Stanley Cup as a head coach. I'm like, they're going to be a tough out. Well, I got news for you. Whether it's Dallas or Winnipeg, for Edmonton, it's going to be a tough out. But we still have work to go before then. Are you surprised Dallas is up 3-1, Ron?
I am. But then again, we all kind of, I think you included, would say that Colorado-Dallas series, a lot of people felt, could be the Cup winner coming out of that first-round series. So when they were doing the lines the other night on the return of Heiskanen, who looked off. He fell of his own volition a few times. He clearly didn't have the stamina. As Kevin Bieksa was saying, not only is your timing off physically, but your timing's off mentally, and you're moving into a fast-moving river to come into the second round. So anyway, they were doing the lines before the game on Hockey Night in Canada. It was a David Amber hosted show, so I'm watching on TV, and they had Blake Wheeler in, who was terrific. And they were going through, as Wheeler said, look at their fourth line. That's where the Wyatt Johnston, they have him on the fourth line, and he's got Jason Robertson on his wing. That's their fourth line in Dallas. That's how deep they are. Now, that means Sam Steele from, Sherwood Park is up playing on the third line,
right,
and playing a very important role as a third line guy. But they're deep. And what happened with Vegas, it seems, Hurdle didn't look like himself ever in the series.
No.
And Eichel was super dangerous.
He was fantastic last night.
Yes, wasn't he though?
Ron MacLean from NHL Hockey on Rogers.